Hello, I'm Juliet Foster and we're at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, a global initiative championed by the UAE and backed by the clean energy powerhouse Masdar. On today's ADSW Live, we are focusing on decarbonisation, in other words, carbon capture, carbon trading and, of course, the promise of hydrogen. But before that, a quick look at where we are today before we meet the first of our guests.
There are many pathways to net zero, and getting there by 2050 is a promise the world made in the Paris Agreement back in 2015. Our global appetite for carbon fuels must be replaced by a growing range of new, cleaner systems. Hydrogen could be the key. Hydrogen is the world's most abundant element. It's efficient and affordable, and its only waste product is water. But it's expensive to transport. Innovative ways of capturing our current carbon emissions for storage or for profit will power some sectors onto cleaner blue hydrogen. Energy giant Aramco helped solve the transport challenge in 2020 by converting hydrogen into blue ammonia and sending the world's first shipment to Japan. And in the UAE, ADNOC sent the first shipment ever of blue ammonia to Hamburg. The ultimate goal is green hydrogen, powered by renewable energies from the wind, the sun, geothermal, and ocean. In Abu Dhabi, a demonstrator plant is being established at Masdar City for green hydrogen production to convert carbon dioxide into sustainable aviation fuel. Masdar has also partnered with shareholder ADNOC and BP to develop clean hydrogen hubs in both the UAE and the UK. As we make this urgent energy transition, low-carbon nuclear power plants providing so-called pink hydrogen will also continue to play a role. Transport is one of the heaviest emitting sectors, but at Copenhagen's International Airport, an offshore wind farm powers the hydrogen and e-fuel plant, helping Denmark deliver zero-carbon domestic air travel by 2030. Steel is another hard-to-abate industry, but UAE steel manufacturer Emirates Steel Arkan has partnered with Japan's JFE Steel to build a green steel factory here in Abu Dhabi. Blue, green, or pink, to hit net zero by 2050, we need to move ahead on all the options.
According to the Brookings Institution, steel, cement and chemicals are the top 3 emitting industries, and they're also the most difficult to decarbonise. Transport is also considered hard to abate, especially air travel and cargo. Well, Mariam Musallam Al-Qubaisi held sustainability and business excellence in the Etihad Aviation Group. She also serves on sustainability task forces in both the UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority and the International Aviation Transport Association. She's a very busy lady, but I'm delighted to say that she now joins me in the studio. It's very good to see you, Mariam. I mean, look, tell me about your sustainability role at Etihad. What does that involve?
Well, we're responsible, my team and I are responsible for drafting and actioning the sustainability strategy in Etihad, which very much revolves around decarbonization, biodiversity protection, and waste management. It's a comprehensive strategy customized to Etihad, but also one that can be replicated by other airlines throughout the industry.
Okay, so it's a trailblazer in its own right. And how are you actually driving that strategy? Because it's quite fast, the actual components.
Well, we're a fast country, right? Etihad is Arabic for unity. The UAE stands for, unity for prosperity, unity for people, and unity for planet. And in that vein, Etihad is very much in trying to trailblaze, as you correctly mentioned, the path to sustainability. Now, our focus is on decarbonization, and we do this with the concept of unity in mind by uniting a lot of the industry partners, academia, and even our competitors in our climate battle.
And I guess that the customers also get involved in that too, because they are very savvy, they're very aware.
Indeed. So our journey was very much, we were all alone, and then we widened the net and included our industry partners. And most recently, we started involving our customers and the corporates we serve. So we launched our Conscious Choices program, one that focuses on the corporates and another on the guests, to educate and encourage eco-conscious behavior.
Okay, so it's a very holistic approach that you've embraced. Okay, I hear what you're saying about the importance of that sustainability strategy, but why is it important to have it in the first place? Does it come from a point of admission?
So we admit that we run a very carbon intensive operation. This is an industry that had free reign of pollution for quite some time. And we at Etihad admit that we are a contributor, and therefore we are responsible for the solution to decarbonize the industry. And that's why we said we will comply with every local and international regulation, but this is not enough for us. We want to go a step ahead, and you know what? We want to even further catalyze technologies and expedite their introduction into our operations. And that's when we started the Greenliner program with Boeing, and later the Sustainable 50 program with Airbus. And in essence, these are really call to arms to combat the climate problem. And we look to industry, we look to academia, we look to our competitors to join forces and help us devise solutions. And this is an open invitation, to be honest. I think it's very important that we use this platform as an open invitation. Anyone, if you have an idea, if you have a technology, if you have a product you want to demo with us in Etihad, send me an email, sustainability@etihad.ae, because we are here to trial these things. And I'm very, very proud to say that the programs did end up generating new interventions that we have integrated into our operations. So we are going to now fully integrate Satavia, a UK-based company's tool, artificial intelligence tool in terms of contrail management. We're also going to offtake sustainable aviation fuel from several ports and make this business as usual in our operations. And this was basically the success of trials that we used in our programs, our Sustainable 50 and Greenliner programs.
Etihad sounds like a company that's in a hurry, in the sense that you know what happened in the past, you've been honest enough to admit it, to make for a better travelling experience in the future. Given that aspiration, what will sustainable travel look like in the next 10 years or perhaps the next 20 years with you guys helming it?
Well, Juliet, I like to put my Emirati hat on. This is a very young country. Imagine what we did in 51 years, right? So I think the future will be very, very positive for us. I'm confident that we will reach decarbonization, net zero, even before 2050. I think if I look at a short-term goal and a long-term goal of how the future of aviation should look like, I would love to see better air traffic management. I would love to see operational efficiencies applied in terms of contrail management and the use of low-carbon aviation fuels in terms of short-term goal, and obviously the investment in nature-based solutions and potential carbon capture and storage technologies. Long-term, I would love to have superb air traffic management and navigation, superb operational efficiencies, and definitely sustainable aviation fuel, either in the form of sustainable aviation fuel credits, something we demoed last year in our book and claim experiment, flying a net zero flight to COP, or having sustainable aviation fuel available backdoor in the UAE.
Okay, look, so much to talk about. Sadly, time goes against us, but this is a story that is set to run and run and run. Mariam, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. That was Mariam Musallam Al-Qubaisi. She heads up Sustainability and Business Excellence in the Etihad Aviation Group. Fatima AlShaygi serves as TAQA's Vice President of UAE Asset Management. Now, she oversees the strategies, policies and programs assigned for the company's UAE power and water generation portfolio. And I'm delighted to say that she now joins me in the studio. It is very good to see you. How are you?
Very good to see you. I'm good, thank you.
What I want to ask you is about the level of representation of female professionals within the energy and utilities field. Are we seeing an expansion in this area for women? What is it they're bringing to the table?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question, and let me start with welcoming you to the ADSW. Obviously, as you might have noticed around, the energy sector continues to increase in terms of women representation. And if we look around, there are many leaders who are representing the energy sector and utility sector per se. So in terms of the women representations in the utility sector, we've seen that in the last couple of years, the number of women representation have increased significantly, yet it's underrepresented in the overall energy sector. From a leadership perspective, we've seen that the utilities tend to have much more representation in leadership positions, women in decision making, as well as women who are able to put to the table and drive certain policies across nations. So I've joined the energy sector around 12 years ago, and I can see the big jump in terms of the increase of women in technical aspect and specifically engineering. So you can see that today and the new generation tends to get more increasingly interested in engineering, sustainability, and other technical sort of specialization that the previous generation was not really interested in.
Points down to education, really, that if you steer it in the right way, you can attract the talent, catch them early and nurture them as they go along.
Absolutely, absolutely. And today here in the UAE, we see that the leadership have continued to emphasize, to encourage women to go out of their comfort zone, to push them to be at site, to work as technicians, as engineers who are leading currently the field. So from utilities perspective and as TAQA's group, today we find young ladies who are very enthusiastic, very well talented to pick up jobs that has underrepresented by women earlier. So we see ladies with their helmets, with their boots, going to the site and fulfilling in a very talented way and performing their jobs in an excellent way that has not been the case, I would say, 10 years ago.
I mean, you yourself are a decision maker and you're responsible for a wide portfolio of interests in the green technology field. So how do you prioritize where your attention needs to go first? What are the challenges there?
To be honest with you, as I've mentioned, and driving from the thought in terms of education and the leadership continue to push women to take part of the technical sort of sector, the issue is retaining those talents. And generally at very young age, once they graduate from universities, they tend to be very enthusiastic about picking up this job. However, the issue is continuous development and retaining them to ensure that they continue to develop to hold leadership positions. So from TAQA's perspective, TAQA have set targets in order to reach to around 30% of leadership across the TAQA group. This is a 2030 target in alignment with the wider UAE nation targets to ensure that at least 30% of the leadership at TAQA's group is represented by women. In addition, November 2022 is when TAQA have announced the first Women Council. This council puts together initiatives as well as ensure that women have got all opportunities to position themselves as leaders of the sector. In addition, bring in young leaders to be inspired by the existing ones to take this role in the future.
Okay, well look, it's a fantastic responsibility. You're doing very well because clearly you have got this pipeline of talent that's following up and you're part of that process of nurturing them, getting them to the top. But Fatima, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're very busy, so I'm going to release you so that you can pick up where you left off. But that was Fatima AlShaygi. She serves as TAQA's Vice President of UAE Asset Management. Ali Aljefri is an advisor in the Technical Hydrogen Studies division of the ADNOC Group. He leads several initiatives across the hydrogen value chain, from development all the way through to execution. And I'm delighted to say that he joins me right here in the studio. So thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for hosting me.
Fantastic. Now, let's start with the basics. Why is hydrogen so important?
Well, let me start by highlighting the critical role that hydrogen plays in the energy transition. Experts estimate that by 2050, 18% of the world's energy demand will be met by hydrogen. And this is to decarbonize sectors that are not suited for electrical power, that are hard to abate sectors, such as mobility for, let's say, aviation fuels and marine fuels. Another example is agriculture and fertilizers production. Another good example is steel making and other heavy industries. And this is why hydrogen is very important in the energy transition.
Okay, but when we talk about hydrogen, there are variations. So what are the different kinds of clean hydrogen?
That's a good question. So hydrogen is mainly produced either from water or hydrocarbons. Green hydrogen is produced from water using renewable electricity. And as of December of last year, ADNOC became a shareholder in Masdar, a global powerhouse in the clean energy sector, with a target to produce 1 million tons of green hydrogen every year starting 2030. And this will remove an equivalent of 6 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And another way of producing hydrogen is through natural gas, and while capturing the CO2 in the process and sequestering it underground. And we believe that this form of producing hydrogen, which is called blue hydrogen, is a stepping stone to establish the value chain of hydrogen and pave the way for green hydrogen to take over in the future.
Okay, but whenever we hear about hydrogen, ammonia enters the conversation. So, why is that? What is the importance of ammonia in the green hydrogen discussion?
Well, another piece of the puzzle is how to transport hydrogen. Hydrogen is very light and difficult to transport and make it liquid. And here where ammonia comes to play. Ammonia contains hydrogen. It has an established supply chain and value chain. It is a mature technology and it has a market, especially in fertilizers. And that's why we consider ammonia as a way to transport hydrogen. And at ADNOC, we have already demonstrated ammonia transporting. We have already transported blue ammonia cargoes to customers in Europe and in Asia. And our commercial scale ammonia production facility is expected to start in 2025 to produce 1 million tons of blue ammonia every year.
Okay. It's interesting as well that you said that you're able to transport it, because I know that there are people who are concerned about hydrogen. So this really knocks that element into the rough, that it's actually quite safe to move around.
Exactly. There is an established supply chain for ammonia. People know how to produce it, people know how to transport it, and we've done it for many, many years before. So it's very easy to transport in ammonia and in many other forms as well.
And why is it important for ADNOC to be involved with clean hydrogen?
Well, at ADNOC, we already produce hydrogen. We produce yearly 300,000 tons of grey hydrogen. So our experience in production of hydrogen, transporting it, and supplying it to the end customers makes us suited to be leaders in the lower carbon versions of the hydrogen.
Okay, well look, the hydrogen story will go on, and I'm sure that we'll be discussing it in even more detail at COP28, because you will be there, won't you?
Of course, we will be present in COP28, and we're happy to tell you all more about hydrogen during that event.
Well, that's the date. We're going to see you there in November to hear more about that hydrogen story. But there, sadly, we have to leave it. Conversation there with Ali Aljefri, who's an advisor in the Technical Hydrogen Studies Division of the ADNOC Group, and he has a big story to tell going forward. Time now for a roundup of the day's news from Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. The Global Food Tech Challenge trophies were awarded last night. Winners will split the $2 million prize awarded by the UAE to support and attract cutting-edge agri-tech solutions. The early-stage startup winners have each developed new and greener ways to grow, preserve and dispose of food. And the winners say the prize money will help fund expansion.
I think what's impressed us most about this competition is the government support for the competition and the different government agencies involved. There seems to be a palpable drive to find solutions for sustainability. And I think this city is probably an example of that. They've taken an inhospitable place in the desert and created all this. Now that really is a sign of good leadership and inspiration.
An African energy initiative with a remarkable 1.2 terawatts of energy potential announced yesterday could boost African GDP and create 14 million jobs. Africa is home to 60% of the world's best solar resources. And finally, COP28 organisers have unveiled the event's new logo. The spherical design suggests we are all in one world together, showing a collection of icons representing people, technologies, wildlife and nature encapsulated in one circle. COP28 will be held at Dubai's Expo City in just over 10 months. Qais Al-Suwaidi is the Vice President in charge of sustainability at TAQA, and he now joins me. It's good to see you. Now, you attended the COP27 in Egypt. What were your experiences of that? How did you feel about it?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. As you know, COPs in general have rather recently become these, global events that are very unique in the way they set up, especially when it comes to them bringing together, government representatives, which is, what COPs are really about, climate negotiations, making sure we reach the next big deal, the next breakthrough when it comes to climate action, making progress on that front. But more recently, they've also become about climate activism. They've become about climate action from whole of society, as it were. A whole of society approach. You must have heard that term quite frequently mentioned in this setting at ADSW. So what COPs now are doing, they're bringing all parts of society. When it comes to TAQA, so for us at TAQA as an important utility company for the Middle East region, but globally, for TAQA it was a very important event, especially COP27, given that it comes just after we announced our emission reduction targets and ESG strategy. But it's also important because it gave us the opportunity to showcase and talk about the efforts we made recently to make climate action a reality, to make progress here in the UAE, but also globally. They were also important to make sure that we collaborate with other important players, whether in the UAE regionally or also globally.
So really this does bode incredibly well for a COP28. And in terms of TAQA itself, as you said, you're able to showcase your commitment at the COP27. So what are the interim goals and the group's recent ESG strategy? What are they, given what happened in Cairo and what can happen later this year?
Yeah, so last year was a big year for us in TAQA. We announced our, again, as you said, interim targets, the emission reduction targets, greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and we also announced our ESG strategy. So our ESG strategy really focuses on 6 key areas, 6 material topics, as the jargon goes in ESG. One is, of course, given that we're a utility company, is our emission reduction target. So last year or the year before, we announced our commitment to net zero by 2050, in line with the UAE's ambition, but in line with the global ambition as well, achieving net zero by 2050. And last year, we announced our interim target, so the target that puts us on a pathway to achieve net zero by 2050. And that was 25% reduction in our emissions by 2030. And that translates into 33 reduction in our emissions in our UAE portfolio. We're, of course, a global company with footprint in 11 countries around the world. So that's the first thing. So together with the emission reduction targets, of course, come renewable energy. So we're ramping up investment in renewable energy and increasing the share of renewables within our portfolio. The other important area is water. So we are a key producer of water here in the UAE. Water desalination is an important source of water for us in this region. So we're committing also to switch at least 2/3 of our water production to the more sustainable reverse osmosis technology. In addition to that, in our distribution networks, we're going to reduce the water loss by 25% by 2030. So that when it comes to our emission, the E sort of pillar in our ESG strategy, the environment pillar for both water and electricity. When it comes to the social part, occupational health and safety is paramount for us in TAQA. So we work to improve that further. Community engagement, corporate social responsibility, that's also another key area for us. We're committing to increasing our spend when it comes to CSR. And then the third important pillar as well, that's also relevant, very relevant to the COP28 discussion, the COP discussions in general, is inclusivity and equal opportunity. So we want to make sure that women, people of different ages, different nationalities, are all, including people of determination, are included in our human resources, in our human capital and TAQA, both internally but also externally, working together with the broader community. And the third, sort of the G part of ESG is governance. So corporate governance is also high up in our priorities. And then again, making sure our ESG strategy is implemented through strong and firm mechanisms within the company.
Qais Al-Suwaidi, thank you so much for joining us. And Qais, of course, is the Vice President in charge of sustainability at TAQA. And I think they're going to be extremely busy in that run-up to the COP28. Decarbonisation is, of course, one of the hot topics at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. All the different ways to get there and, of course, how to speed up the transition. Joseph Webster is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Centre, where he serves as hydrogen and offshore wind lead. His project work includes topics across hydrogen, ammonia, electricity, liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and oil and gas markets. Well, he sat down with my colleague Christina Millman earlier this week and told her why events like ADSW are so important right now.
Yeah, so I'd say the first key takeaway is, I think across Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, with the Global Energy Forum, is that there's a real need to balance climate goals with economic realities. So we need to have this energy transition, but we need to do this in a very thoughtful manner, such that we don't actually, have too much volatility in energy markets, have too much volatility with economics. So we just need to ensure that people continue to support the energy transition. So we need to balance both, climate goals, but also maintain healthy economic growth rates. So I think that's a key transition for me, a key takeaway for me. Additional one with respect to hydrogen is, there's a lot of excitement around hydrogen. I think it's a wonderful technology. There's a lot of potential for it, but we also need to be deploying it in a thoughtful manner. So there's, it's going to have a limited impact. It's going to be very important, but also it's going to have a limited impact. So I think we need to look at hydrogen as a hopeful vector, but also, be realistic about its applications as well.
Okay, you're obviously somebody who understands the whole range of new energy technologies that we'll need for decarbonization. We'll probably need a lot of them. Which ones would you say, or which one are you most excited about? So hydrogen, I think 2022 is the year that hydrogen really had a coming out party through the Inflation Reduction Act, through all these cost improvements in solar with wind. There's a lot of movement towards electrolyzers. So I think hydrogen's a very exciting technology, but there's also, I think offshore wind is going to be increasingly important in the years to come. Whether that's the United States, whether that's in Asia, the Indo-Pacific. So I think there's a lot to be excited about in energy. There's a lot of challenges moving forward, but at the same time, we do have a lot of opportunities as well with these new technologies, and so I'm hopeful about that. And when you say hydrogen, are you talking specifically about green hydrogen?
So for both, yes. So I think, green hydrogen, absolutely very excited about. If you look at Texas, which has the best green hydrogen potential across the entire United States, there's a lot of deployment of solar, of wind, of batteries. So I think that's very exciting. But there's also, I think, a more realistic appraisal of blue hydrogen's potential. I think there's a lot of pushback against natural gas in any respect. But I think there's a recognition among a lot of folks increasingly that there actually is a role for natural gas to play and for blue hydrogen to play. So for instance, in Europe, they recently just announced this new blue hydrogen project between Norway and Germany. So I think there's more policymaker acceptance of realities, and I think we will increasingly see that in the mainstream as well over the next year. So that's.
And if you could just finally, you touched on it already in one of your previous answers, but the challenge for states in managing their energy security priorities and their decarbonization efforts in tandem, is that
really where the pinch point is going to be?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I think it's going to be very difficult to manage. I mean, I think it's going to be more of an art than a science. I think we need to look at the lowest hanging fruit. So this can be a collaborative effort as well. So I think the UAE is doing a wonderful job deploying renewables. The UAE is gifted with both excellent solar potential, excellent wind potential, but also some of the world's least carbon intensive oil as well. So there's a lot of opportunity to go develop both, our oil resources, our natural gas resources, while also deploying renewables at the same time. So these objectives are not in tension necessarily. So I do think that there's a way to both decarbonize and improve energy security. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges for the year ahead is how we manage these two goals, which are not necessarily competing, but could be in tandem with each other as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah.
The Octopus Energy Group serves 3.5 million customers globally, with operations in 14 countries and a $6 billion portfolio of renewable energy assets across Europe. UK-based Octopus is also a leading investor in solar and wind energy and offers green hydrogen services to those industries that can't be decarbonised through electricity. Well, I spoke with Octopus's CEO Greg Jackson early this week, and I began by asking him for his take on what's happening in the consumer energy market right now. Greg, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here.
It's an absolute pleasure. I mean, what an incredible event.
I know they've worked so hard on it, and well, it's brilliant. And you know what? We're having this conversation against the backdrop of an energy crisis. I mean, where are we in the world right now with that energy situation?
We're probably bang in the middle of the energy crisis, certainly in Europe and some other areas. But what we're seeing at the moment is people talk about gas prices have started to soften, but they're still 3 or 4 times the normal. It takes a number of years to rewire global supply chains. It's really a rerun of what we saw in 1973 when,
The oil crisis.
Exactly, yeah. And again, what we saw there was the reaction was energy efficiency. We've seen a 15% reduction in gas demand in Europe. People looking at alternative sources, so bringing gas in from places other than Russia. An increased focus on energy security at a national level. So in 1973, the US decided it would never be dependent on the rest of the world, and certainly Europe is beginning to look more at national security. And then finally, alternative sources of energy. A real doubling down now on the move to, for example, electrification, especially through renewables.
So this is history repeating itself, but in a more profound way.
Yeah, in 1973, what you didn't have was the next generation of energy. You had some switch, for example, from oil to gas. But here we're also seeing, the advent of renewables, which even before the crisis, were obviously a huge area of growth because of the climate imperative, and also because they're increasingly cheaper. The crisis has really caused this doubling down then on the development of renewables.
So what can we do in response, beyond talking about it and identifying the problems?
So in the very short term, there are 2 things we need to do. One is energy efficiency, and that can both mean using less energy and using it more wisely. In the short term as well, we need to look after the energy consumers of the countries that are most affected. The reality is that means government support. And we need to do that because otherwise we're going to see even worse economic impacts across the economies, and it's going to be even harder to grow out of COVID. In the medium term, we can deploy renewables very, very quickly. Now, there are a lot of constraints. Interesting, there's an enormous amount of investment appetite in the world, but grids are not typically set up to take on this kind of pace of change. So governments are going to need to get involved and make that more agile. But the private sector is here to drive that new generation.
So given that, what do you see as the role, for example, of countries like the UAE in the global transition? Because clearly they are at the centre of this.
I'm here in the UAE partly because we're going to have COP here later in the year. The UAE is the very centre now of the focus on sustainability. But even before that, I've been hugely impressed by the leadership shown here. The UAE are putting pressure on governments in Europe, for example, in the UK, to show they're serious about renewables. Now, that kind of leadership is what we need to drive this change. So I think the UAE is the centre of the opportunity now to drive change faster, certainly in Europe and other parts of the world.
So how can Octopus be part of that? Because clearly you're here for a reason, you're not just watching what's going on. What ambitions do you have in relation to the UAE and what it's trying to achieve going forward?
Yes, Octopus has got some fantastic partnerships around the world, really to deploy the technology that enables consumers and businesses to benefit from renewables faster and cheaper. We've got partnerships in Japan, in the USA, in Australia, in several European countries, in the UK. But across the Middle East and North Africa, we really want now to deploy investment in the technologies, in the people, artificial intelligence, software, digitalization, consumerization that will enable electric vehicle batteries, thermal control systems to maximize their use of renewables when they're abundant, so we get the cheapest power we've ever had.
Okay, well, good luck. It's a big vision.
Thank you, Julia. And I've got to say, if there's anywhere that we can talk about this, where people have got the same vision, it's right here.
Okay, he wants to talk. Get that? He wants to talk. Greg, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Greg Jackson. Greg is the founder and CEO of the Octopus Energy Group. Hydrogen is, of course, also gaining traction in Europe. One of its champions there is Teresa Ribera. She's Spain's third deputy president and a long-time champion of the country's clean energy aspirations. Well, she spoke to my colleague Christina Millman at the Atlantic Council's Clean Energy Forum earlier this week.
Hello, I think that it is a very important role and great expectations that we have on green hydrogen. We know that we need to decarbonize the economy. We know that the green energy could be a large share of the solution. We need to transform our energy systems. But at the same time, we know that there are some final uses of energy that cannot be easily electrified, that will still need to find something to solve their problems. And green hydrogen has a great potential to be that solution. So we need to test how to produce green hydrogen. We need to test how to make this green hydrogen be the final solution for final users, and how to build all the industrial and services global chain around green hydrogen. And this deserves cooperation between public and private institutions, but of course between governments on regulation and support.
And are you seeing that cooperation in Europe, for example? What's happening in Europe on green hydrogen?
In Europe, everybody is very excited about hydrogen. We in Spain have launched our green hydrogen roadmap 2.5 years ago, and we have placed an important amount of public resources of the recovery plan post-COVID. So to facilitate the industrial value chain, so to facilitate testing how we produce hydrogen in valleys that can create hydrogen near to final consumers. And finally, we have decided also to help in the transportation towards the north of Europe, not only from ports, which is also the case, but also through a pipeline that could take some time to be ready. But this is not only the case of Spain. There are many other member states that are investing and want to understand how to use hydrogen. And of course, we need the regulation that could provide the business case, but also the safety and the transparency conditions to be sure that everybody is happy with what they intend to be useful.
What are you most looking forward to at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week? What's your goal here?
Well, I think that this has become a very interesting flagship event of every single year, and we need to get this additional step forward. So to say, now we know that for many reasons, also in geopolitical terms, we need to speed up the energy transformation. And we need to take into consideration the social impact of doing things properly. What is the cost for consumers? What is the type of skills that we need so to create a new ecosystem around energy? How we can play in a fair manner so to ensure that the most vulnerable can have access to these very important opportunities. Water and energy are the main basis for a healthy household day-to-day well-being. So I think that that's part of the agenda that could be very present this year in this conference.
And how important do you think that these multilateral forums like Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, like COP, of course, how important are they for the response to global challenges like climate change?
I think that we have realized it and experienced that the world is very small. We thought that it was huge, and it's not the case. It is small, and the resources are limited, that's for sure. So we need to build prosperity on the basis of cooperation. And in order to do so, to be constructive, to be cooperative, it is very important to talk to each other and to build common projects. That's much more useful and helpful than working on confrontation or on competition. Of course, we need competition, but in good mood, for good purposes, and working together.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Well, it's time now for our quote of the day, one that perfectly caps our discussions here at ADSW about decarbonisation and green hydrogen. It's from global climate champion and former US Vice President Al Gore, who says the sustainability revolution is being jump-started in every country and every corner of the world. It's bigger than the Industrial Revolution, and it's happening faster than the digital revolution. Well, that's all we've got time for today on ADSW Live. I'll be back again tomorrow, but don't forget that you can follow all the latest on our website at adsw.live or on social media. The handles are now on your screen. Tomorrow, we will be taking a look at finance and investment on the path to net zero. We'll see you then.